are talking The Devil's Disciples, written and directed by Joe Hollow. Now, this is down as a 2024 movie, but it is in fact a 2014 movie that was then released as simply Disciples, also released in the UK as The Watcher. And The Devil's Disciples is a slightly re-edited version with I think one new scene added onto it, and thus it's got a new release for 2024. So when you're watching this, you're going to notice it has a couple of actors that have passed away, Angus Scrimm, Tony Todd for example, and that is why. Now it does have a pretty good cast of recognisable horror personalities, as I've mentioned, and Angus Scrimm, Tony Todd, Leanna Quigley, Brinky Stevens, Debbie Rochon, just to name a few. Bill Moseley, and they're in relatively small roles, to be honest with you. It's lots of kind of large cast in kind of small roles type thing. And the story is about these kind of cabal of demonic entities, I suppose, who are on Earth trying to figure out a prophecy that is coming to pass. And this prophecy involves the emergence of a kind of a new either threat or potential ally in the form of a descendant of a seraphim, I think they said. And they don't quite know what it might mean, but everyone kind of has different ideas about it. And what will happen, you will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what works in this movie's favour. So the biggest thing I think for most horror fans here is the cast of recognisable kind of like scream queens and, you know, horror movie actors. So there's a whole host of them. Leanna Quigley gets a reasonable amount of screen time. Brinky Stevens gets a reasonable amount of screen time. Others, like Bill Moseley, don't get a huge amount. But it is nice to see everyone. Everyone gets kind of like speaking parts at the kind of the very least. And it's quite fun. They're all kind of decked out in this kind of goth gear, looking like, you know, they're out to a Vampire the Masquerade themed disco night or something. But, you know, it's kind of quite fun to see all these kind of like character actors. I mean, mainstream audiences probably won't know who any of them are, but if you're a B-movie horror fan, you'll probably recognise at least a few. And, you know, like I say, they're all kind of decked out in their kind of goth gear. They're all kind of, I quite like the kind of the costuming here. It's a little bit cheesy, but kind of in a fun B-movie way. The movie does have a kind of a lot of kind of practical VFX, kind of makeup and stuff, demonic makeup. You know, it's on the cheaper side. Let's not kid ourselves here. This is definitely in B-movie territory here. But I still kind of quite enjoyed some of these makeup effects. If you don't mind low budget practical VFX, I think there's some fun ones here. And it does have a few sort of gory moments here and there as well. This movie has a lot of boobs. A lot of boobs. So if you're you're a fan of the mammary glands, then you may want to check it out, because there's plenty of them on display here. So, you know, there's lots of kind of, you know, attractive ladies all decked out in their kind of like devil garb and everything. So any wannabe goths, this is possibly a movie to kind of check out. Now the film does have somewhat of in some respects a complex plot, in others it's relatively sort of simple. I think it's a simple plot made complex, if that makes sense. So there's a fair amount of kind of like double dealing and betrayals in this kind of demonic community, as you'd probably expect. I mean, if you can't trust a demon, who can you trust, I suppose? So, you know, it makes for a sort of duplicitous kind of state of characters here, all of whom are somewhat kind of self-serving and everything. So there's a little bit of fun to be had with these kind of machinations and things like this. Let's talk about what doesn't work. This is Exposition the Movie. I've never seen a movie in recent memory which is basically like 95% exposition scenes. It is just a scene after scene of characters in a room telling you about some event or some prophecy or some relationship or something like that. And that is nearly all of the movie. Different characters, and then we get the occasional, you know, beheading or what have you, but it's basically just like exposition after exposition after exposition. It is very much tell and do not show, and thus makes for quite a sort of dull affair, if I'm honest, despite some of the kind of the visuals, because the actual plot is just people discussing things. And let's be honest with you, I mean, as much as I kind of love Brinky Stevens and the rest, maybe they're not the best actors ever, you know, and some of these kind of lesser known people, again, the acting isn't particularly strong. The dialogue isn't exactly sparkling. It's very hammy. And it's just kind of like lots of scenes of discussing prophecy and, you know, oh, this demonic character over here has done this and that, they've said this to that one, and it's just like, okay, it's a whole, all we're watching is load of people talking about other characters, and with you know, okay, great, you know, that's basically the film. And as such, you kind of like, it's sort of hard to follow if you want to really look at the minutiae, the detail here, because it's just a bunch of people discussing things at the end of the day. I mean, there's very little actually, you know, things that happen on screen, actions that happen on screen that leads to, you know, an effect. There's really nothing, there's no like set pieces or kind of like scenes where people are doing things really, rather than just discussing with one another about what is going on. So it's a kind of dull, to be honest with you, and I think the movie ends up being super convoluted because probably they can't afford to have these things shown on screen, so rather than that they have people discussing it on screen, and as such you're kind of, there's a huge cast and you're trying to remember who is it they're talking about. What are they talking about? Some prophecy involving some virgin, whatever, you know, and it just kind of goes, because it's not exactly gripping stuff, I have to be honest with you. I mean, some of the kind of like, as I said, the set design, the costuming and all the rest of it is fun while they're doing it, and we get the occasional break with some sort of like someone getting killed or someone with their bangers out, but you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, even that gets a little tiresome because the context is so sort of like loose in regards to what's actually supposed to be kind of going on. So yeah, it's not really a film I would particularly recommend, I have to say, unless you just want to watch it for the vast cast of fun kind of like supporting roles, these kind of horror actors, and you know, there's some sort of fun makeup. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. I was thinking of 4, but it really, the plot is just so dull. It can't really be anything more than a 3, I have to say. So that's it, a 3 out of 10. Have you seen either of these versions, The Devil's Disciples or The Disciples / The Watcher? Let me know your thoughts and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.